I once read something about Floyd Landis that he could actually finish a massively hard ride or race, park his bike, change out of his bike clothes, hit the couch, and go right to sleep. Man, I wish I could do that.
Yeah, me too, Audie. But for me, settling down after a hard effort, it's just not my strong suit. My legs ache and twitch and my mind buzzes, and that means settling down and recovering is really delayed.
Yeah, Floyd knows that most people are not like him. In fact, most are like Fatty and me in that we have a hard time settling down after that hard effort. So, when I really want to accelerate the recovery process, I turn to Floyd's of Leadville's full spectrum tincture, and I hope I pronounced that right. Tincture? It's the drops, right? You know, I have the capsules as well, the Floyd's capsules, but the drops are just more effective for me. Recently, Floyd told us why.
Some people feel like it affects them faster because some of it possibly is absorbed through your gums as you put it in your mouth, rather than a capsule that just doesn't dissolve until it's in your digestive system. So there is a belief that it works faster that way and possibly even more effectively.
Be sure to check out Floyd's of Leadville, our presenting sponsor at floydsofleadville.com, and use the code FATTY at checkout for a 15% discount on your first 2 orders.
And thanks, Floyd's of Leadville, for sponsoring the show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Floyd's of Leadville. This is Season 2, Episode 19 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country.
Yeah, Hadi and I are super excited for this episode for a couple of reasons. The first one's because it gives the two of us to share the other podcast the two of us work on together, which is called the Silca Marginal Gains Show. You might find it hard to believe, but it is an even nerdier cycling show than this one. Hadi and I talk with Josh Poertner, the CEO of Silca, and the maker of what I, as the owner of both a Superpista Ultimate and a Superpista Digital floor pump, are objectively the very best pumps in the whole world.
And in that podcast, the three of us usually talk about little ways you can improve your cycling performance and digging into the science of those improvements. But Fanny and I recently got together with Josh to talk a little about how Leadville racers can get free speed on this course. It's a great interview with some good practical advice.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we've got good nutrition advice you can use right now, as we are just under a month until race day, and Ryan Morris checks in with guidance for your wheels.
Before we get to all that, a quick reminder that if you have not ordered your Leadville podcast t-shirt yet, it's not too late to get it to you before the race. We've got them in all sizes, in both men's and women's, plus we've got a code for our listeners so you don't have to pay for shipping.
Yep, just go to bit.ly/Leadville t-shirt, and at checkout, use the code podcast to get free shipping.
Yeah, that's a Leadville 100 podcast t-shirt, by the way. It's our t-shirt, Fatty, and we're very proud of it. It's us.
I wear one every day.
Right. And finally, we want you to consider something else, and that is the day after the Leadville mountain bike race, there's a run, and there's an opportunity to run with me and the Hammer and a bunch of other people going for the Lead Woman, Lead Man series. It's that 10K that they do all the time after the Leadville 100. The 10K at 10K, we're calling that. Race start is late morning, so you have time to attend the mountain bike awards, slip on your running shoes, and meet me at the start line, 6th and Harrison. Plenty of room available. Just head to that Leadville Race Series website, sign up for the 10K, and look, we're going to do it. We're going to have fun. And in case you're wondering or worrying about whether or not you're finished, don't worry. If we don't, Fatty will just carry us back to downtown Leadville.
Doubt I'll be able to even carry my own self back to Leadville. How about this? I promise an unprecedented level of cowbell for you, Hadi, as well as for the Hammer, of course, and anyone else who is bold enough to do this run after such a grueling day on the course.
Unprecedented cowbell? I like the sound of that.
Hadi, you and I started the Leadville podcast last year because we've got a lot of stories to tell and a lot of experience to share from this race. But I would say, and no offense at all intended to you or to me here, that the two of us combined have maybe a tenth of the cycling knowledge that Josh Poertner, the CEO of Silca, has.
Yeah, both you and I have to scramble to look up definitions for terms we've never even heard of. Josh has made a career of understanding complicated engineering and physics principles and applying them to cycling in a really practical way.
Yeah, and of course, based on the kind of work and the kind of people that he works for, it's usually about road cycling. But Hadi and I got Josh on the mic to answer a few questions that Leadville racers might enjoy as you look for marginal gains of your own. Josh, welcome to the Leadville podcast. It's good to have you on a different show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
There are a lot of us who, while we are not the pros that you are used to helping out, still want to be as fast as we possibly can. And you are the master of aero. So first question for you is, for an endurance mountain bike race like the Leadville 100, how much, if any, does being aero even matter?
Well, it largely depends how fast are you going. How long is the event? There's different ways to look at it. One of the things we talk about a lot on the road, which is totally true here, is in road, 80% of the forces working against you are aero. And on the mountain bike, even at lower speeds, you're probably in the half to 60% of the forces, depending on the surface that you're on. But, say half of what you're pushing against is aerodynamic force. Now, if we can make a 2% change to that aero, that would make you 1% faster, right? So if you're, 6-7 hours on the bike and I can make you 1% faster, that's, 4 or 5 minutes. So yeah, it's absolutely present, even at these, the lower speeds of mountain relative to road, absolutely present.
Mm-hmm. Josh, if you look at the pro bikes, you'll see a number of aero clip-on bars for those guys. They'll wear shoe covers and aero helmets.
Skin suits.
They're looking for those marginal gains for sure. But for the rest of us, I think you can imagine what it looks like. We're in an upright position with wide bars. We might have a blousier jersey on, some type of loose clothes. We're trying to stay comfortable for most of the day. That said,
maybe a camelback.
Maybe a camelback. What can the average person at least keep in mind when it comes to trying to cut the air just a little bit better without going to those extreme levels of helmets and shoe covers and that stuff? How can we just be better on the bike, aerodynamically speaking?
Yeah, so position is huge, right? And I think, again, depending on the event, it's, how much can you modify your position for aero? Event like Leadville is a little bit different than, say like your standard cross country race or your, enduro racing. Can you use an aero bar? Can you use the clip-ons, or, like they've got those little mini clip-ons that, could allow you to achieve a pretty significantly more aero position on, on the pavement sections, so maybe you're not more aero all the time, but you're more aero in the faster sections where it really matters without sacrificing position in the rougher areas. Tight clothing is huge. I know everybody loves their baggies, but really good, tight fitting, well-designed clothing is a huge aerodynamic factor. Helmets are big, going with something more like a more aero-focused road helmet over a more traditional mountain helmet. That can be watts, even at moderate speeds, and on the faster, some of the, I think, Leadville, you've got some high speed downhills and things that, a tight fitting clothing and a good helmet can be, a couple miles an hour speed difference, at 35 miles an hour, right? I mean, it can make a really significant difference there. And then I think the other bit is just really looking at the setup, exposed cable housing, kind of just the general cleanliness of the setup, right? There's probably a lot of, little nip tuck type stuff that can be done to clean up, just those little details. Those all add up in small ways.
Yeah. Now, one thing that perhaps really adds to your drag on the race is the race plate. And I don't think you've seen it before, but it is a fair-sized rectangle that you are supposed to mount on the front of your bike. Yes. Are there any tricks that we can do without actually cutting the strip that the timing mat reads, that can make us a little bit less like we have a sail at the front of our bike?
Yeah, absolutely. You can curve it. Anything's better than flat, right? And so curving it backwards on either axis is gonna help you out. I think in my ideal world, if you could kind of curve it about the vertical axis, right? Sort of bend the two sides backwards towards you to kind of, make the airflow go to the left and to the right around you. And having looked at this and had this discussion actually before, I think you could actually probably make it work in your favor to some extent if you could get enough curvature in it without somebody getting upset about that. I don't know what the roles are, the stewards. And so, but my personal experience, I've gotten in a lot of trouble a lot of times from a lot of race stewards. So, where my brain normally goes is that place that gets you busted for something. But yeah, if you could bend that thing into sort of a little, almost like a parabolic shape, you could probably achieve half of its standard width. And you could actually probably, mount it in a way that it improved the aerodynamics of the front end of the bike, especially if you're using it to cover, kind of the nest of cables and crap that are coming off the underside of the handlebars there. I'd give that thing a nice healthy bend, zip tie it together, clever use of tape.
I make a little like airfoil cowling almost, where it's guiding the air almost around your head tube and around you a little bit. Fatty, I could see where maybe you could take zip ties into the corners, the four corners, and pull those four corners back towards the rider a little bit, and then you make just round the thing out a little bit so it's shaping the air better as you're flying off of Kevins there. Who knows? It might add to it. How about the rider themselves? As they're riding on those flat bars, Josh, it's just, being conscious of how to talk. Is there any method to that, or is just get low? Is that just the message there?
Yeah, get low, get narrow. I think, having not ridden a mountain bike in anger in 30 years, in my day we rode narrow bars, right? And I'm always shocked to go to these events or work with athletes and see just how wide mountain bike bars have gotten. Things it's like a hockey stick now. Like I don't even know if my hands can go that wide for some of the positions that I see. But if you could get to a setup where you could get your hands in kind of more into the what we would call like the wind shadow, right? Like the silhouette of your body. Think if you were to stand in front of yourself looking backwards, your arms are sticking out like wings. If you can bring them in line with the body and kind of put your hands, even kind of in line with your knees, you're reducing your frontal area pretty considerably, right? And so, we talk a lot in the marginal gains about the CDA, the aero term, that it's the coefficient of drag times area. And, you have those two tools to think about, right? Can I improve the CD? Can I make it a more aero shape? Can I reduce the A? And, just from a really simple point of view, if you set yourself up in front of a mirror and then moved your hands inward and outward, you'll see that you can change the A pretty considerably without too much effort. So the real question becomes, how do you achieve that second bar position? Is it, I've seen again the little kind of mini extensions. I know a number of years ago, working with some guys trying to win the Cape Epic, we did some stuff where we used road handlebar tape and made like inboard grips, kind of either side of the stem to create a second hand position. And I think that narrow hand position with low elbows at the high speeds that's worth a lot. I mean, that can be worth a really considerable amount. Wattage equivalent wise, you're probably talking in the 25 to 40 watts of energy expenditure for the same speed, just by adopting that alternate hand position.
Probably goes without saying, but we're going to say it anyway. But this is not something you want to try for the first time on race day, right?
Right.
Get so that you are comfortable with and competent at well before you get to Leadville. If you are good at, if you are at the point where you feel like you can race in this new alternate hand position, feel free to use it. Don't feel free to use it if you have never done it before and you are wrapping bar tape on your bar as you drive to Colorado.
Well, let's shift to tires, Fatty. How about a tire question?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about where the rubber meets the road. You go first. I'm sure we got a lot here.
Oh, where the rubber meets the dirt, you mean, in this case.
Yeah.
Only road
Pavement,
and certain
dirt. We got them both.
So let's talk about tires, Josh. Look, can we make enough gains here to give up some traction and maybe go with a narrower tire? Is that going to help us with rolling resistance and aerodynamics, for that matter? If we try to go with a skinnier tire, I know a lot of folks think about this going into Leadville, and they ride around on 2.35s most of the time, and they're thinking about a 2.0 or something narrower. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I got to be honest. I've never ridden it, and I've never mapped it, for anybody else, and so I don't know it well enough to have a really well-reasoned response, but I'll tell you how I would tackle it. I would, typically we would map it and break it out into sectors and then really consider what each sector is, right? And then sort of, group them together to determine, okay, this is, this is all the flat pavement. This is all the uphill pavement. This is the downhill pavement. This is the dirt, right? And then, really, we've done this with, Belgian Waffle Ride and some of these, Dirty Kanza, some of these events, where you can really sort of use this percentage from the mapping to make the best trade-offs, right? Like, if we map it out and we realize, it's 60% pavement or hard packed dirt that could be super fast on a narrow tire at a little higher pressure, then I might kind of bend my decision in that direction. Now, if you said, but the gnarliest section on this course is this terrible 10-mile, downhill where people get killed, right? Then I would change that decision. Right? And so, I think similarly, like we look at a lot of these tour stages and a lot of the European road racing, there's always a look of, are you racing for time? Are you racing to finish? Are you racing to win? And if you're racing to win, a lot of times the discussion is, okay, where do we think the key move is really going to go? And then how's the race going to finish from there, right? And so, in road racing, we might say, we think Paris-Roubaix is always a great example, right? Okay, the wind is from this direction and it's raining and, there's these three other factors. And so we're pretty confident that the race is going to be won out of a small break from, 30 kilometers out. Okay, that, we know what those roads look like. We know that, this year being a good example, we know there's going to be wicked crosswinds, and the attack that sticks is probably going to stick in a crosswind section, which is on pavement. And so, let's pick up that extra couple of watts of efficiency in that pavement section, knowing that the key move isn't likely to happen on the cobbles this year, right? Whereas, if you had a tailwind, the decision would be totally different. And I think of that as the way here, right? What, if you're racing to finish, what's the section of the course that's got you kind of worried the most, and maybe optimize comfort, traction, all those things around that. If you're racing for time, I would use that sort of balanced statistical approach and say, okay, the majority of this event is, you tell me what's the majority of the event in your thinking.
Well, the majority
of the event.
is
Go
dirt.
ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it is dirt, but that is countered by some very fast paved sections and some climbing paved sections too. So I don't know, Fatty, what is it? You probably know the numbers better than I. Pavement to dirt and climbing to flats.
And I've never thought in terms of amount of distance, but I've thought in terms of amount of time on those. And you really are not on pavement for all that long during this race, right? You have a fair but fast descent on pavement at the beginning of the race, but you don't come up that pavement on the way back home. And then there's a very short section of pavement just connecting two pieces of dirt. So pavement doesn't factor in terms of time very much at all on this. You're on a lot of graded dirt road, and there is some fairly rocky technical descending is what are the reasons why you might want to have the wider and perhaps meatier tires. So, I mean, I think Josh makes a great point. You got to think about what matters to you. Where are the pieces of the race that might be the weak link in your chain, and choose a tire accordingly. For me, what I heard is I'm going to ride with a 2.4. Because it is the descents on the technical stuff that worries me the most, and having a little bit of an advantage on the descents far outweighs the very short amount of time that a narrower tire might give me on the pretty unimportant to me part of the pavement.
Yeah, it makes sense. The other one to be, I think, really aware of is lockout on suspension, right? Suspension is such an amazing factor, and as it's trickling into road at Roubaix, it's always fun to play with. But it really does give you additional option on the tire side, right? You can run your tires a little bit harder and not have quite as much impedance loss with suspension, right, than you do on a rigid bike. And you can also run your tires a little bit softer if it's incredibly rough, with lower risk of pinch flat or that sort of damage to the rim, because the rim can kind of get out of the way. But on smooth hardpack or pavement, the hysteretic losses, the bobbing losses to suspension are really high, right? So you've got to have the suspension dialed, but you really need to be able to lock it out as much as possible on those smooth, kind of hard pedaling sections. And maybe more key even than being able to lock it out is once you have the ability, is to remember to actually do it. Which is one of the reasons, we saw that Pinarello has that smart kind of electronic system that they developed this year. On a road bike, I mean, we've certainly seen that hard pedaling with suspension, I mean, it costs you real wattage. And if the suspension is done well enough, the rider forgets that it's there. And so there really is a trick to remembering to engage the lockout and then disengage it when the time comes. That's a big part of the strategy, but that can save you some pretty considerable time.
We'll get back to Josh in just a minute, but Hadi, I want to cut in with something I noticed this past weekend when I was racing the Crusher and the Tusher. On that long washboarded descent, I'm sure you will never forget, the one known as the Col de Crush, which is really similar to the Columbine descent on Leadville and is super washboardy. I saw at least 2 or 3, I'm not even sure how many, unused tubes and CO2 canisters ejected along with the usual assortment of bottles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someone didn't have their seat pack fastened properly.
Yeah, or they might have come out of jersey pockets, or how some people tape their tire change stuff to seat posts?
If you don't fasten up your tools and tube change stuff just right, it's only a matter of time till you lose it. I've done it. I've had this happen to myself in Glacier National Park on some rough roads.
Yeah, so that in this race I was doing last weekend, I had my small Banjo Brothers seat pack with 2 Tubolito tubes, 2 20-gram CO2 canisters, a CO2 chuck, a tire lever, and a small toolkit. And I'm repeating, that is in a small Banjo Brothers seat pack. And none of that is weighing on my back, and none of it is dragging down on my jersey. None of it is in danger of rattling off my seat post and the electrical tape that's holding it on there after 5 miles of washboards shaking it loose. It's all secure, it's safe, and it's ready for when I need it.
Yeah, that's the essence of Banjo Brothers right there. Practical, affordable, reliable bike bags that will be there when you need them. You can get 15% off your Banjo Brothers bags by going to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites. Banjo Brothers is Minneapolis-based, in business since 2003, and they are just good guys.
And it isn't too late to get a good seat bag before this race. $18 minus 15% is about $15, which is not a lot to spend on some real race day security. Once again, that's banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites.
Let's pick up now with our Josh Poertner interview, leading off with a discussion of one of the single cheapest ways you can improve your Leadville race time, getting your air pressure right.
How should a mountain biker, an endurance mountain biker, pick the right air pressure for an all-day ride on a true mixture of surfaces like the Leadville 100? Is there a place to start, and how do we pick what is the right pressure for us going forward?
Yeah, so it's really related to your weight, tire volume, and surface roughness. My experience. Something like a 2.4, I'm not, and again, I don't do a ton of off-road stuff, but from some of the Cape Epic work I've done years back and some other things, I've seen lighter weight riders looking to go fast, running in the, high teens, low 20s, where it's more, I would say, on the rougher side. As it smooths out, you maybe want to run that up into the mid 20s. It really is extra tricky in mountain bike because the suspension tuning also plays such a critical role, right? And because the tire is the first spring in the system, it really then drives the suspension setup. And so I think one of the things that I know we've done for some of these multi-day, epic style events is you might almost be changing, wheel set or tire size, depending on the course or the service conditions for the day, more so even than you're changing pressure day to day. Maybe you're going a tire without side knobs on this day where it's a little bit faster, or something more of a file tread, and then maybe something a little bit more aggressive on a day where we're in stuff that's looser, or if it rains, we'll go to a more aggressive tire and maybe take it down even a couple PSI from there. So that's such a hard question because it's so individualized to that specific course and specific rider weight and specific day. But the one rule of thumb that we always kind of work with is really try to seek smoothness in the way the tire feels like it's working with the ground. We talk a lot about, particularly in road, where our brains perceive the higher frequency vibrations as speed, and our brains can really perceive pretty small acceleration type inputs from the ground as going fast. And I think you ride some of these tires with the wider space knobs. I feel like they can even create a little bit of that, right? It's like, oh man, I can. Yeah,
a little vibration.
This really feels like I'm moving. And of course you look at the data afterwards and go, yeah, we really weren't moving all that well. And so there is absolutely something to that seeking of smoothness, because typically, that's right about towards that sort of inflection point between those impedance losses, the vibrational related losses, and the casing losses in the tire.
Yeah. You gave us some good sort of like boundaries for tire pressure to start from. It's where, anywhere from the high teens up into the mid 20s. Hadi, I'm curious, what pressure do you run right now?
Depends on where I'm riding. which,
Sure.
obviously, but at Leadville,
But for Leadville.
yeah, for Leadville, over the years, I've continued to go down. And I think the last time I lined it up, and I was running pretty big tires, running pretty high volume tires. I think it was 2.35 up front because I had a rigid fork and a 2.20 in the back. And I ran 22 up front and 20, I want to say 4 or 5 in the back, somewhere in there.
Yeah. And you weigh what, 180?
No, probably on race day, I was 165.
Oh, wow. You're lighter than I am. So I ride it, around 20 up front, 21 in the back. I have my wife who weighs around 120-ish pounds. She rides with 19 in the front, 20 in the back. So that kind of gives you a sense where you want to be. Every year, I meet people who are under the impression that they ought to be at around 40 psi front and back, and of course they're feeling everything, and that is obviously way too much, right?
That is way too much.
Yeah, it feels fast, but is not.
It feels fast.
Is not fast. Yeah, no.
Okay,
right.
Josh, a lot of stops along the way at the Leadville Trail 100, and usually at one or two of those spots, some of us may consider re-lubing our chain. It's a dry and dusty course. Normally it's dry and dusty there, so chain lube chains take a beating. Is it worth it to us? The time we spend lubing our chain, will we get the gain we need by taking the little extra time to lube our chain mid-race?
You certainly might. Again, it's one of those depends answers. When you look at the data, the generally dry, quote unquote, dry chain lubes, they just don't work well, if at all. I mean, they're pretty bad. So I have strong opinions here. I have strong data also. So you don't want to be using one of these dry chain lube products because they're essentially like a PTFE or something in sort of like an alcohol carrier, and it kind of wicks into the chain, and then the alcohol flashes off, and 10 miles later, your chain is, if you can hear your chain, that's a problem. So you want to go with a wet lube. And, I think one of the things that we've always really preached around this is, wet lube, really load it up good, get it in there. You want to get as much lube in the chain as possible, and then clean the outside of the chain as much as possible. So that, you're not getting a lot of dirt and stuff stuck and attracted to the chain. If you do that with a proper viscosity lube, 100 miles, you're probably fine. If you can hear it, that's watts, right? We always said sound and power go together, right? Nobody goes to the stereo store and wants the 5-watt stereo system, right? Like if you're making sound, you're using power to make it. And squeaky chain, squeaky chain can be 10, 15 watts of loss at higher chain tensions. It can be a considerable loss. So, I would say if you can feel it or hear it, absolutely. The threshold of, I feel like what people notice is probably in that 4 to 5 watts range. Like people, oh yeah, my chain feels dry, or I can hear the noise. That probably starts at 5 watts. And so if it gets bad, if that happens at mile 60, by the time you're done, you're probably, 15 watts disadvantage. The last thing there to consider, and it's the fastest option, and for an event like this, really probably the best overall option, is the hot melt dip wax, right? It's, this is the one where you take the chain off, you clean it super well, and then you dip it and soak it in hot molten wax in a cheap crock pot that you've purchased, and then put that thing on race day and race it from there. That'll easily go the 100 miles. The wax doesn't attract dirt. Nothing really wants to stick to it. And what happens with the wax in the chain is, over time, the wax kind of purges out ever so slowly due to the micro movements of the link pins and everything within there. But as it's purging itself out, you're getting the beautiful lubrication effect, but it's also, as it's coming out, it's keeping dirt from coming in, right? The dirt can't get in there as the wax is coming out. And you're typically on a wax chain like that, you're good for a couple of 100 miles. And so, that if you're willing to put the time in, that's really your best solution.
Right. And if you're not willing to put the time in, like I'm not, I will say that a lube that you can just squirt on and has worked very nicely for me is the one that Josh recommended. That I think it's called Nix Friction.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, Nix Friction, NFS, is phenomenal. It's one of the best tested. We actually used to sell a Silca version of it, and now we just point people to the company that makes it. And it's a phenomenal lube. We can post the link to their site, and there's links to Australian company that's done some testing on this that shows that the Nix Friction has some of the best durability, but it also reduces chain wear. Which I think is interesting.
Yeah, on your recommendation, I've been using it on both my road and mountain bikes and am very happy with how long it lasts. And like you say, there is a noticeable difference in how it feels. So big fan. So yeah, we'll for sure get a link to that in the show notes. So Josh, we've of course been asking questions about things that we can think of. Are there any other little marginal gains that a Leadville racer can try to make to get a little bit faster or better time at the Leadville 100?
I think it's pay attention to the details, right? Your clothing should fit tight. The shoes can be a good one. Again, the lace shoes over buckles or shoe covers can be a big deal. Often not thought about in mountain bike, but bladed spokes over round is a big deal. So when you build up your next killer wheel set for Leadville, go with the CX Rays or something along those lines. You will find speed there. Yeah, and then I think we've covered a lot of the other stuff, and the big one that I always lead with is test. All this stuff. The more you do it, the more you try to measure it, the more you'll learn, the more ideas you'll have, and I think in time, especially if you're taking good notes, it becomes almost a little bit of an automatic process. Where your brain is kind of thinking in I could be doing this, or I could change my hand position, or maybe I should drop my elbows. I mean, all those little things really do add up. And over an event the length of Leadville, I mean, it really, I'd say relatively simple things could be 4 to 5 minutes, and an aggregation of all the marginal gains things that we've talked about here. I mean, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, easy.
Ooh, I'll take that. Take that gold buckle to go. Well, sounds like, Fatty, we have a lot of stuff here to test. Do some field testing here. I got quite a little list coming from Josh here. First, we talked about, being aero. Look, mostly it's about your clothes, and that's a pretty simple one. Wear some tight-fitting clothes. Yeah, it's a long race, and maybe being in a tight jersey all day doesn't sound perfect, but it's going to save you some time on the bike. Get low, get your body down if you can. Find a way to do that. The best way is just bend over when you're going downhill. You'll be lower. And maybe work on that number plate. I don't know. We'll have to ask the Leadville organizers, Fatty, if that's okay. If we shaped.
Oh, yeah, we'll check.
We're not going to bend it. We're not going to damage it. We're just going to shape it a little bit.
Don't ask. Don't ask. If there's one thing I've learned, it's don't ask first. You ask forgiveness.
Tires. Tires is a big deal. Obviously, we're all still probably sweating over what tire width we're going to run. That's kind of a toughie, but Josh suggests, looking at that tough part of the course. The part of the course that's going to give you the most trouble, and to make sure your tires are paying at least some attention to that as you go through there before you start going narrower or wider or what have you. And for pressure, this was a great one. It's not vibration, it's smoothness you want. So feel that tire. You want to feel it for smoothness, not vibration. And when you get things smoothed out on your mountain bike tires, chances are your PSI is pretty darn close. Suspension, yes. Don't let your suspension fight you, rob you of speed, because it will, especially on a flat or a rolling section. You want your suspension dialed, and you want to be able to lock it out. There's those sections, Fatty talked about them. There's some road sections there, enough so that you want something that kind of acts like a road bike. And to do that, one of the things you want to be able to do is lock out your suspension. Chain lube. We're all going to lube our chains, right, before the race. At least I hope so. Josh prefers wet over dry. A lot of the mountain bikers and the mountain bike shops will say, oh, here's your dry lube because it's dirty and dusty out. But Josh has a counterpoint to that. He says wet lubes will do you much better when it comes to keeping your chain lubed and moving properly. And what's that? If you can hear your chain during the middle of the race, it's probably an indication you want to pull over or get to that next rest stop and quickly apply a little more lube and be on your way to 6th and Harrison. That's quite a list, Fatty.
Yep, a good list of good stuff. Josh, thanks so much for taking the time. Looking forward to all of us getting, some marginal gains at Leadville.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. It's great being here.
It is worth pointing out that you can hear all three of us, Fatty, me, and of course, Josh Poertner, the CEO of Silca, every other week in the Marginal Gains podcast. Give us a listen at marginalgainspodcast.cc.
Yeah.
Hadi, at some point, you and I need to do a segment on this show on cycling eyewear, because I have some glasses I have been absolutely loving. The Shimano S-Fire X glasses.
I've been wearing those too, Fatty. I'm really liking how they're great in both bright and cloudy conditions with those photochromic lenses. Do I say that right? Photochromic?
I think so. If you got it wrong, then I do too.
Okay.
So, and there are a couple of things I love about them as well. First, they're super light, and so they stay up on my face and don't slip down my nose when I start sweating, and bouncing around on aforementioned washboards, right? And second, the optics on these are really good. They're really clear. Like a lot of other well-known brands, I'm not going to say anything by name, but they don't scratch the way that a lot of those, and in particular, one really well-known brand really does. I'm about normal tough on my glasses. I take good care of them, but on dirt roads and so forth, on trails, the lenses get dusty and dirty, and sometimes you've got to wipe off the lenses with the terry cloth part of your glove or with a corner of a jersey during the ride.
Yeah, like at the beginning of the LT100. You're going to get down to Kevins. Mm-hmm. Likely you're going to be behind a group at that point who've already been on Kevins, and there's going to be dust everywhere.
Oh, yeah, clouds of dust. And with one very well-known brand, I'm not, again, mentioning by name, that kind of action will leave scratches after just, a single wipe. It's happened. With the S-Fires, I've been riding with these for a couple months now, on-road, off-road, everywhere. And they're still very clear. The S-Fires are really good glasses at a really good price.
And you can find and learn more about the S-Fire glasses as well as the other Shimano products at bike.shimano.com. We'll also have a link in the show notes for this episode at Leadville100podcast.com.
Hadi, it scares me to say this, but we are basically less than 1 month from the Leadville 100.
And how are you feeling about this upcoming race?
Good, but nervous, as always, every time. Of course, there are things like I feel like I can improve on.
Yeah, it's not too late to make changes, but it's getting close now. And we've got our expert on nutrition, Goose Roxanne Vogel, to walk us through what you ought to be checking and, if necessary, correcting during this last month before the LT100.
Roxy, welcome back to the show. We are just about 1 month to race day, and I got butterflies in my stomach. I want you, as someone who has been to a lot of races, has done a lot of high pressure events, tell us, for nutrition wise, what should we be doing right now in order to be prepared for the race?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys. I love Leadville, and this will be my third year coming back to, witness and be part of and support athletes during the bike event. So I've definitely gotten people ready for this event before, and there are certainly some things you can be doing 30 days before you even, get to the start line. So I think number one would be really, this is a good time to focus on cleaning up whatever you can. If you've been a little bit loosey-goosey during your training, maybe you have gotten away with it because the volume has been pretty high with your training and you can kind of burn whatever when the fire is hot, so to speak. But I think during the last 30 days, you really want to be careful. You don't want to get sick. You want to try and optimize your performance as much as you can. And a month out is a good time to really hunker down and kind of be diligent with your nutrition. So yeah, that being said, I'd say, this is the time when you should start really focusing on the best ways to clean it up.
Yeah, as you probably know, Roxanne, us bike riders, we're a little weight obsessed at times. We got a guy named Fatty here. Look, he nicknamed himself this terrible name just so he would lose weight. And I gather, a lot of our racers are going to be thinking about their race day weight. Should we, in these last 30 days, be trying to run a calorie deficit or keep things even Steven or adding a few calories?
That's a great question. And, everybody wants to be kind of their leanest, most weight efficient self by the time they get to the start of a big race. And I think it's not a great idea to run a huge calorie deficit just before a race. And so, 30 days out, that's close enough that if you start kind of breaking down your system and running in a deficit, you risk kind of putting your immune system into a dive. And so it's a little risky to do that and create a huge deficit. One thing I would say is maybe shift your macronutrient composition. So that being said, maybe during this time, especially once you start your taper, you can shift a little bit away from the high carb diet that you're used to training really on, like a high volume load on, and then shift it more towards like some more protein, a little more fat, and then a little less on the starchy carb side. So if you're looking at your plate and normally your high volume training plate looks like half of the plate is starchy carbs like rice or pasta or potatoes, a quarter is colorful veggies and fruits, and a quarter is a protein source like the palm of your hand size of chicken. Maybe shift that in the last 30 days so that only a quarter of your plate is the starchy tan variety of carbs. Half of your plate is fruits and veggies and kind of these lower glycemic, but like water dense carbs. And then a quarter of your plate is still, or maybe even a little bit more, a protein source, a quality protein source. So just kind of shifting things can actually shift the number on the scale too. So yeah, making small tweaks in these last 30 days, but not a dramatic cutting of calories.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I was so focused on the scale that I did not think about my power and wound up as light as I've ever been, but also with a much worse time than I would have had if I had paid as much attention to how is my endurance, how is my strength, as opposed to how's my what is how's this magic number on the scale doing. So you're absolutely right. Go ahead and fine tune your weight, but you for sure don't want to make that the focus of your Leadville training.
Right, absolutely. And the worst thing would be to cannibalize the muscle that you've worked so hard to put on, right? The very specific strategic muscle that you've put on. So again, focusing on a little bit higher protein intake will make sure even if you're losing weight, hopefully not that much of it is going to be from lean mass.
Now, how about on-bike nutrition? We're always learning, and is it too late to be making changes to what you're drinking, what you're eating, what how often or what gels you eat, or by a month from the race should you have that completely nailed down and you should avoid making large adjustments?
Well, I don't think a month out is too far into the game to make any tweaks. I would say have kind of your base nutrition plan in place. Like, what is the general drink mix you're going to be using? What are the brand of gels you're going to be using if you're using gels? But you can certainly make some tweaks. I would say I would feel comfortable if you've had at least 2 or 3 longer rides with a specific product or, strategy in place. That would be fine. So you still have a little bit of time, but keep in mind, if you're going to be tapering and you're not riding as long, then that's going to kind of cut into that time that you have to practice your nutrition strategy too. And so, you just be cognizant of that. So yeah, you still
How
have
late
time.
is too late?
I would say, a week before, 10 days before, that's too late. I would probably stop making changes a couple weeks out. So, yeah.
And I want to pick up on the bike point there too, Roxanne, and that is in this last 30 days, obviously our rides change from very, long endurance type rides to shorter, punchier rides. We're fine tuning everything. How do we match up our on the bike nutrition strategy when it comes to those training sessions?
So, the higher the intensity, and if you're doing these, shorter, punchier rides, you're going to need to focus a little bit more on, fast acting, easily digestible carbohydrate sources versus on your longer rides, you can afford to be a bit more flexible, having some real food sources. And so I think you just need to be a little bit more careful with what you're eating kind of during these shorter rides, and maybe not even taking in so much, right? So while on your longer rides, you can eat a sandwich on the bike basically, but these shorter rides, as you're kind of getting closer to race day, really this is a great time to practice how you're going to take some of your sports nutrition products and like how that's going to look as far as where you keep it and how accessible and timing. So looking at, are you going to take a gel every 30 minutes? Are you going to remember to do it? Do you need to set a timer or some sort of strategy for timing of intake? I think this is a great time to practice that, especially for some of the more technical sections of the race. So maybe working on not just timing, but also how you're going to get it in. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So some good thoughts there, Fatty. A month out here from race day. Of course, we hit Roxanne about losing weight. Probably not a great time to be thinking about losing a lot of pounds right now, but you can maybe shave a little bit here and there by shifting your macronutrient profile, as in the way you eat or what you were eating. Go away from all that high carb stuff and maybe up the protein fat. Here's the breakdown she gave us. If you're looking at your plate, it should be a quarter those starchy carbs, a half filled with vegetables and green stuff, and then a quarter of your plate would be a protein source of some sort. That's about a month out. So again, big weight losses, probably not a great idea right now, but you might lose a pound or two just by shifting that macronutrient profile. Your strategy, adjusting your strategy, your race day strategy is okay right now, but not wholesale changes, just tweaks in what you might do on the bike at Leadville for race day. All right, next time we get with Roxanne, this is a good one. Even if you're not a racer, I think this is going to be a great topic. We're going to talk about traveling, being on the road, and your nutrition. Very important, because we can get way off as we hit the road, whether we're going to Leadville or anywhere for that matter. Next time we speak with Roxanne Vogel. Fatty, I'm pretty sure the NV components on your new race bike cost almost as much as the S-Works frame they are mounted to.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. If you just look at the wheels alone, the M525 set goes for $2,100, which is cheaper than they used to be. So it's a great deal. Then I've got the carbon stem, the bars, the post. Building a really great bike is a big investment.
Yeah, NV has premium stuff, and the company knows kitting your bike with their carbon loveliness is an investment, and that a fear of destroying any of this stuff could be reason for a customer to look somewhere else, which is why NV has extended its previous coverage, which was a warranty against 5-year manufacturing defects.
Yeah, and now NV has a no questions asked lifetime incident protection plan. Basically, if it breaks, they've got your back. And NV isn't too concerned about how it breaks either. If you destroy a wheel going down Columbine, well, let's all, fingers crossed that does not happen to any of us, but still, it's got you covered. If you crash, wipe out your bars, covered. If you forget your bike is on a roof rack, oh, that's happened to me. Drive into a garage and obliterate your bike. Anything labeled NV is covered.
Yeah, this is the mother of all warranties. The only caveat is you have to be the original owner of these NV products. You can learn more about NV's warranty, wheels, and components, many of which seem they're made with the Leadville 100 in mind, but which can handle pretty much anything you throw at them on any terrain at NV. That's ENVE.com. Speaking of wheels, we were speaking about wheels, weren't we?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Our chief mechanic wants to make sure your wheels, NV or not, are in top shape before you go hammering down the power line. We're back with Ryan Morse of Diablo Wheelworks, and as the name suggests, Wheelworks. Ryan is an expert wheel builder. I mean, that's your primary business, would you say? Building wheels?
Building wheels, absolutely. Yes, all kinds.
Okay, so we're going to talk about wheels this time with Ryan, and unfortunately, we're kind of up against the clock with Leadville, so not enough time to build a fresh set of wheels.
No.
But
We can talk about them.
what should we be looking at or for regarding our wheels as we head closer to race day?
Sure. Well, just like anything on a bike, as you're getting close to race day, you're going to want to be making sure your bike is prepared as well as you are. So checking things, and on wheels, I would say most importantly is cleaning the wheels and rims periodically, checking spokes, checking the rim bed where the spoke and nipple exit. Ultimately, those are key areas of concern to make sure things are in good shape. So if you see some odd-looking shapes or some stress cracks, those are obviously areas of concern, and the only way you're going to find those is by periodically checking them, and definitely a good idea before a race.
Now, truing, you obviously true a lot of wheels here at Diablo Wheelworks. Should truing be done only when we see a wobble, or as just a matter of practice?
Again, you're wanting to check things that way. So if you keep an eye on your wheel and your wheel looks straight and then it's not one day, truing is your kind of first option of taking a look at the wheel in that specific area. So sometimes coming out of true is due to wear and tear from riding, from regular, abuse from having fun on your bike. In that aspect, sometimes in a new wheel, for a sense, tension can drop if ultimately spokes will stretch. So a wheel can come out of true for a lot of reasons, but keeping an eye on it is a good thing, and it gives you an opportunity to check the area.
And so is it a good idea before a race, even if you don't see a wobble, to have a wheel builder check your wheel for tension and truing?
Absolutely. Squeezing spokes is a great way of checking to see if things feel within reason, meaning you can kind of give a squeeze or a jiggle on spokes to see if one or two or three or however many are tighter or looser. If you have spokes that are too loose, you'll have some wheel issue ultimately. And if you have some spokes that are too tight, you can have wheel issue. The only real way to know for sure what tension things are at is by using a tool called a tensiometer.
Which Ryan, of course, has.
Yes.
Or probably has more than one, I would think.
3.
Knowing you?
Yes,
three
3.
of them. He has a bit of a problem, folks, with the tools and tensiometers. Let's move to tubeless now, and I think I would say it's safe to say better than 90% of the Leadville racers will run tubeless.
I would assume so, yeah.
You're right. It's just the way to go on mountain bikes these days. And so let's first talk about tape.
Yes.
Should we be replacing tape as a matter of routine, tubeless tape?
I think that's a case-by-case type of situation. What I see here, the only time I need to replace tape is if I end up needing to replace a spoke or nipple on a wheel, something breaks. Ultimately, you have to peel the tape up to gain access to that. So in a perfect world, if you peel your tire off to, let's say, inspect the tape, and tape is nice, looks good, no tears, no bubbles, it's not peeling off in any areas, I think you're good to go. If you see some weirdness to the tape, or you're concerned or looking at it going, I wonder, it's time to replace.
Good. And are you a double wrap guy or single loop around the rim?
You know, it depends on the rim, and I tend to also ask the rim manufacturers, and a lot of them, if they don't list it, will at least have a recommendation if you contact them. Typically for lower pressure mountain bike style rims and tires, one wrap is usually sufficient. Road, gravel, depending on air pressure, tire width, usually at least one. For road tubeless, I would say two. Sometimes you have to go more, depending on how well the tire and rim interface. It's becoming a lot less of an issue now. Rim manufacturers and tire manufacturers have really stepped up to make our lives easier. I don't fear tubeless setup on most wheels now.
Okay, let's move to the other part of the tubeless equation. That's sealant.
Yes.
Should we be routinely changing out our sealant?
If you ride consistently, I think you should be checking at least every 2 to 3 months. Again, it's dependent upon a few factors, location being one of them. I think Southern California, we're lucky here. Temperature stays pretty constant. It doesn't get too hot, doesn't get too cold. I think that ultimately can have an effect on how long something like that lasts. But good rule of thumb, every 2 to 3 months, take a look. You can do something as simple as remove the valve core and stick a spoke in there and use it as sort of a dipstick to see if anything is actually there. I would say in a perfect world, unseating the tire a little bit to get a physical view is the best way to do it. And if you got some in there, you're good. If you got too little, you can add a little more.
Mm-hmm. And if you have any more issues with your wheels or tires or rims or spokes, it's Diablo Wheelworks.
Yes, it is.
Ryan Morris here in Los Angeles. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Expert wheel builder and repairman, that's Ryan Morris. I showed up on his doorstep recently with a broken spoke and a frown, and he had me rolling in no time.
Yeah, you're lucky to have a great mechanic. We're lucky to have him on the show, too. Hottie, you and I have been big fans of the feed since we launched this show last year, and especially of Morton's. One of the most popular things we've promoted on this show is the Leadville Race Box. And we've recently updated that box for 2019, so it really leverages Morton's. It now includes 4 of the Morton drink mix packages, as well as 4 of the Morton gels. I used those in the Crusher and the Tusher last weekend, and I am really liking them.
Yeah, there's also a two packs each, that is, of Cliff Shot Blocks. I love those things. Scratch Energy Chews, Untapped Waffles, yummy, from Ted King, Amp Lotion to buffer lactic acid before and after the race, a pickle juice shot in case you cramp up during the race, and a free hydration kit.
Oh yeah, there is a lot there, and there's actually even more than all the stuff that we listed here. So go to thefeed.com/Leadville and try out the 2019 Leadville pack. Also remember to use that Leadville15 code anytime you buy Morton, and that's going to get you a 15% discount on all Morton products. I gotta say, I was super glad to have those last weekend as I was racing in the heat and in the cold at the Crusher and the Tusher.
Okay, let's wrap up Season 2, Episode 19 of the Leadville podcast presented by Floyd's of Leadville. If you like the show, give us a 5-star rating and review over at Apple Podcasts. Also share it with your other cycling friends and support our sponsors. Let them know you appreciate them making this show possible. Meanwhile, if you have ideas or questions for us, head to the Leadville100podcast.com comment section and get in touch.
And don't forget to follow us on Twitter. I am @FatCyclist. Hottie is @Michael Houghton. And you can also find us on Facebook, where we are active in the Leadville 100 MTB participants group.
Good luck in your training. Thanks for listening, and we will see you in just a few weeks in Leadville.